We've got to stop letting fear trick us out of living the lives we're meant to be living. From such a young age, so many of us are taught to avoid the things we're afraid of, to avoid discomfort. And from a primitive perspective, it makes complete sense. Fear is the tool we use to tell us when things are dangerous. We rely on fear to keep us safe. So it makes sense that we have this relationship with fear. However, as someone who has let fear guide her for a pretty significant chunk of her life, let me be the first to tell you, fear is not the truth. In fact, fear can be incredibly deceptive. And so something that has helped me not just overcome fear, but move into a space in my life where I know myself and I now fully know what my purpose is, I had to reframe the role of fear in my life and how I interacted with it. Because emotions like fear, jealousy, anger, they aren't bad feelings. But the way that we use these feelings to navigate our lives is incredibly important and can be incredibly impactful, especially if we use them the right way. So I'm going to share with you guys how reframing my perspective of fear has actually gotten me so much closer to myself and in line with the type of life that I've always wanted to live. Many of you discovered me through my video, They Want You to Shut Up, Don't. I posted that video 6 months ago after I quit my full-time corporate job. It was the first time in a long time that I chose myself in a massive way and did something that I was terrified to do. But I took the leap of faith and I did it anyway. And I'm so grateful that I did. One of the biggest lessons that I took away from making that life-changing decision and taking a leap of faith into building my own business and becoming a creative entrepreneur and literally just reinventing my life, let's be real, like my whole life changed after making that decision, was doing what you fear will always bring you clarity. One of the reasons I left that job was because I had completely lost touch with who I was. And I felt this burning desire, even though I couldn't articulate it at the time, to change something in my life because I needed clarity. I felt like my brain and my heart and my soul was just filled with all of the crap that I was carrying from that job. And because I had put that job on a pedestal, I completely lost touch with myself. And so taking that leap of faith and doing what I was afraid of in that moment, which was basically saying goodbye to a sense of stability, which turns out to be a false sense of stability. It really forced me to get out of my comfort zone. And it actually got me closer to understanding what I want out of life. And so the clarity that I had been hoping for, because I had been looking for clarity in that job, whether it was speaking to different managers or trying to carve out my own career path in that company, none of it was working. And so I realized in that moment that I needed to make a change. And it came in the form of leaving. When I say doing what you fear will bring you clarity, what I mean is we are often afraid of things before we even know what they are. So we're not afraid of the actual thing. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of the circumstances around it. For example, if you're afraid of sitting down to write a book, it's not because you think books are evil. It's not because you hate sitting at a computer desk. I mean, it's okay if you do, but I think it's the fact that you're afraid of either being really good at it and succeeding. It's the fear of failing at it, or it's the fear of it not being good enough. It's the fear of making your voice heard and sharing intimate details about your life that you never wanted people to really know, that fear is so much deeper than the thing itself. And so, how can we say we're afraid of something without fully knowing what it entails, without fully exploring it? So, this is what I mean when I say that fear can be deceptive. When I decided to leave my job, I didn't have a backup plan. Like, I knew I wanted to do YouTube, but that was really it. I didn't really have any intention of starting my own business. I didn't realize that eventually I'd want to branch off into writing and filmmaking and public speaking. I had no idea. All I knew was that I needed space in my life to figure out what I wanted, and the only thing that I liked to do was make YouTube videos. That was all I knew. And if I had succumbed to that fear, the fear of not having a consistent source of income, right? Like instability, the fear of judgment from my peers. I was so afraid of what people would think when I left. I was so afraid of seeming like a failure to people in my life, people who had expectations about my life, right? I was so afraid of disappointing people. If I had listened to that, I would still be in that job today, and I would still be miserable, and I would still be so far away from myself. I made that leap of faith not knowing what this journey would entail, and it has not been an easy journey. It has not. But it has also been the most freeing and empowering and insightful journey that I've ever been on. And I'm so grateful that I did it, because out of following my fear, out of choosing it and taking that path, I got the thing I wanted, which was clarity about who the heck I am, the things I want, and what my God-given purpose is. I wouldn't have gotten that if I stayed complacent and if I stayed where I was comfortable. So understand that the fear that you have around certain things, it's based in ignorance. You don't really know what's going to happen if you apply for that job and get it. Right? And so that's terrifying for you because you're comfortable where you are. You know the people that you work with. You know what's required of you. But applying to that job and actually getting it, oh, shoot, wait a minute. What do people say? Like, you were delusional enough to build your dream life and it happened. You know what I mean? You were delusional enough to take a chance and, oop, it fell into your lap. Now what? Right? So this brings me to the idea of the way that we use fear to run away from our purpose. Our purpose is actually already inside of us. It's not something to be found out in the world. It already exists within you. The same way your identity, your soul, all of that, it exists inside of you. And so you can use the world as a tool to discover what your purpose is. But I think that the best way to figure it out is to look within. And a lot of times it's asking yourself what you want. And for those of you who are like, I have no idea what I want, the things that you desire, but that you tend to ignore or push to the side or talk yourself out of, that's probably either in line with your purpose or is your purpose. For the longest time, I was terrified of public speaking. I was that kid in school who, if she had to present in front of the class, I would break down crying. I used to have friends that would sit in the front of the class and be like, just look at me, just look at me, just so I could get through the presentation, because I was so anxious. I was so terrified. And so I grew up feeling like, oh, I'm bad at public speaking, and this is just something that's not for me. And I grew this sort of disdain towards public speaking. That was until I went to college and I was forced to take a public speaking class. And surprisingly, I did really well to the point where my teacher commended me after class. And in that moment, even though I don't think I realized it in that moment, no, a seed was planted. And it kind of opened my eyes to the reality that this thing that I had been so afraid of, or that I convinced myself that I hated for so long, was actually something that I was pretty good at. Fast forward to my journey with YouTube, right? I didn't like public speaking, but I was always drawn to YouTube. And for some reason, I was always drawn to the creators that would just sit and talk with their mic, share their ideas, share their opinions, literally on any and everything. I loved videos like that. I loved people who made me feel good inside. I loved creators whose videos would motivate me and get me excited about my own life. And I ended up creating my own channel and basically doing the same, sharing my opinions, my thoughts on things, my feelings, my life, all of it. Next thing you know, I started a podcast. And mind you, this isn't because I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be, a public speaker or the voice of a generation, right? I just felt drawn to these things. I couldn't explain to you why. I think so many of us, for example, were raised on YouTube. So there's definitely something in that. But not everyone wants to be a YouTuber. Not everyone wants to sit down in front of a camera and record themselves talking. But that was like a dream for me. Always. It's always been a dream for me to just build community online and share my ideas and talk to cool people who get it. Like that was literally all I ever wanted. And so when I created these things, my YouTube, my podcast, I was seeking community. I wanted to share my experiences and to let people know that they weren't alone. And what I ended up finding through trying these things and following my desire without really questioning it was that I have a deep love for this kind of work, for emotional wellness and spirituality and speaking and just hosting important, intimate conversations that help people progress in life. These are all things that I genuinely love. But I wouldn't know this about myself if I hadn't just let myself explore, if I hadn't just let myself follow my desires, even if I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And so when we think about this idea of the ways that we run away from our purpose, a lot of times it's based in the things that we desire, but we shame ourselves out of desiring. A lot of times it's the thing that scares us the most that we're probably meant to be doing or that has some attachment to our purpose. I was afraid of public speaking, and now I'm sitting here with a microphone talking to 830 something of you. What? Huh? How does that make sense? Our relationship with fear is when something is scary, our fear tells us to pack up our stuff and run. But if you take a minute to sit with that fear and ask yourself why you're afraid of something that you know nothing about, the reality is that fear just might be based in ego. You secretly want to do YouTube videos, but your fear has tricked you into thinking that posting online is dangerous. And so you decide not to do it. But it's not because you hate YouTube, and it's not because you hate YouTubers, and it's not because you don't have an interest in cinematography or whatever it is. It's just because you're probably afraid of being perceived. You're afraid of being seen. You're afraid of people not being interested in what you have to say. You're afraid of your friends making fun of you. Okay, those are things that can be worked through. But if you feel called to do this, if you have this deep desire, if you're feeling compelled to share your voice, to share your story, to make fun videos, you're letting your fear rob you of that. So look at that fear, and instead of thinking it's this evil thing, be like, thank you, because now I know why you're here and I know that I should do this, not run away from it. Some of you may have always wanted to write a book, but you've convinced yourself no one wants to hear your story. Your story doesn't matter. Who are you? I'm a nobody. I remember when I decided to start writing, I told someone that I wanted to write a memoir. And they were like, well, aren't memoirs for people who are famous and well known? And a part of me shut down when that person said that because it made me feel rejected. You know, it was one of the first times that I expressed openly that I wanted to be a novelist someday and I wanted to write books. And I finally found the genre that I felt like I'd be really good at and I was interested in. And a part of me shut down. And so I kind of kept that with me for like 2 years or so. And then in the last 6 months, you know, this desire to just share my story has become a lot stronger, right? Like, I just feel compelled to share. And so I decided, no, I'm going to sit down and I think I'm going to write a memoir. And the difference between those versions of me is I let that fear and I let another person's opinion stop me, right? And so I didn't even try to go further into exploring what writing a memoir actually meant. And how do, you know, people who aren't famous or don't have a massive following, how do they sell their books? You know what I mean? But now I'm in a space where whether one person or literally no one reads my book, it's something that I want to do and it's something that I feel called to do. And there's a reason for that. And so now that fear has become something that I'm using as a guide to do something that I've always wanted to do. When we run away from our purpose, a lot of times we're afraid of either failing, we're afraid of what people will think, we're afraid of succeeding, or we're afraid of the change that's going to come. When we choose differently in life, a lot of times life changes, especially when you make choices that are in line with your calling or that are in line with your purpose. God will open doors for you. That is just the way that it is. Take the leap, a net will appear. If it is meant for you, it's your destiny, and you can't avoid that. I mean, you can delay it. I don't know if you can fully avoid it. And so when these changes arise, it's scary, right? So many of us are terrified of change. We're afraid of knowing certain information because it'll change the way that we'll look at ourselves. It'll change the way that we look at the world, that we look at our relationships. And once that snowball forms, it just keeps going, right? And so a lot of us are subconsciously afraid of a shift in consciousness. We're afraid that if we take that acting class, you know, we can tell ourselves, oh, we're just doing it for fun. Like, it's just something that I've always wanted to try out. I'm not taking it seriously. It doesn't mean I want to be an actor or anything. And then you take the class and you freaking love it and it lights you up inside and you've never felt more alive in your life. Uh-oh. A seed has been planted. Now you're like, ooh, my soul really loved that. It kind of wants more of this. And then you're like, no. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. Like, I'm going to be practical. Like, what would people think? That's crazy. I can't audition to be an actor. That's such a silly pipe dream. That's ridiculous. And then your higher self is like, but you loved it. And it felt really good. I want more of that. And then over time, you're like, okay, maybe I'll go to another one, but this time I'll bring a friend and it'll be fun. And you just start slowly inching your way towards the thing, even if you're trying to avoid it. You're feeling called to it. And so, as you try these things and you realize that on the other side of your fear is actually the joy and the life that you've been seeking all along, because a lot of us are anxious and depressed because we're just not living in alignment with the life that our soul has called us to live. And that's because we are letting fear stop us from making choices that will get us closer to our soul's calling, instead of letting fear be a tool that pushes us towards the thing we're afraid of. The things that you're afraid of are going to guide you to your purpose. And it's a journey. It's not something that just happens overnight. You know, when I started my YouTube channel, when I started my podcast, I just loved the way that it made me feel. And I still love the way it makes me feel. I honestly am the happiest when I'm doing this. You know, when I get to sit down to film a video, I'm like, I get to sit down and film a video. I get to brainstorm my ideas and share it with people. I get to hold this microphone and spill my guts, and I love it. I just freaking love it. And so I wouldn't know that this was a passion of mine. I wouldn't know that it was possible to even be successful at this, or this to be a career, right? I didn't grow up around podcasters or musicians or writers. I grew up around doctors and nurses and people who work in tech, you know? So me being a creative, like, it just wasn't something that I thought could make me money or could be sustainable for me. But I was like, I just want to try this and see where it takes me. I just did it for the love of it, honestly. I didn't do it to be successful at it. I literally just did it for the love of it. And so I guess at the core of your desire, at the core of your calling, really, it's like, is there love at the center of that thing? You know, is there love at the center of that thing? Wow, that's so funny how all of it always connects back to love and connects back to God. So when you go towards your desire and you let fear point you towards your desire, right? Sometimes you learn the things that you genuinely want to do, and you learn the things that you're not interested in at all, right? So this is where you get to experiment with your life. You know, a lot of us get trapped with labels. So for me, I've always loved writing. And so when I left my job, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a freelance writer and make money doing that. And then I was like, oh, but I also really like doing YouTube, and I also like making videos, and I also like podcasts, and I also have a passion for creativity and entrepreneurship. So what do I do? Then what is it? What is the thing? Right? And so a lot of times we confuse the purpose and the calling with the vehicle. And so that's where the journey happens, right? You try different things and you try to see what fits. And so for a while I was like, I'm a writer, I'm a writer, I'm a writer. And it felt really aligned. And now, and that's not to say that I'm not still a writer, but that's not the only thing that I am. I'm so much more than that. And my calling calls for so much more than that. Writing is just a tool that I use. It's a vehicle. The same way that YouTube is, the same way that my podcast is. My voice is a tool. Another thing about following your desire and finding your purpose is it requires you to get uncomfortable. It requires you to choose differently. And I really hope that you do that, because if you are unhappy in your life right now and you are feeling stuck and you are just afraid that your life is going to go on and on like this and there's no end, I think it's time for you to choose differently. A lot of times we make these big life-changing decisions when we have nothing to lose. And for me, that's kind of where I was at. I was like, either I stay in this job and feel like I'm dying every day, or I try the thing that I've always wanted to do, but I was too afraid to do, and see what happens. You don't always have to be at that point to make a change in your life. And these changes don't have to be monumental. Like if you discover, I want to be an actor, you don't have to just like up and quit your job to do that without a backup plan. I'm not saying to do that. But I am saying that your higher self, God, like they're always talking to you and they're always guiding you and pushing you in the direction of where you're supposed to be. And so if you open up your mind and allow yourself to believe that there are alternate realities to the one that you're living, if you give yourself permission to think bigger and to try different things and to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves that you feel called to try or interested in, even if you don't understand why, you just might find that you're going to be on the journey to finding your purpose. And this is God pulling you back into alignment with his purpose for you. So I hope that all of that made sense for you guys. I definitely was kind of flowing in and out because when it's cloudy outside, I just get very dreamy. And so it's kind of harder for me to stay focused. But yeah, I wanted to share this with you guys. It felt really important. It was like a really big lesson that I've learned over the last 6 months. And I know that there are people who either, know what their purpose is, but they're too afraid to take the leap, or you have no idea what your purpose is. So I wanted to give you some advice on that. Also, if you guys liked this topic and you want to go deeper and have a more fleshed out discussion about it, I actually created a longer form audio podcast for you guys. So for those of you who have been following me for a while, I'm sticking to Divine Feeline podcast. I'm sorry. Like, that's the one. That's my baby. We're just going to have to go with it. So Divine Feeline, the podcast, it's available on all streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify. So yeah, check it out. I definitely want more people to listen to the audio pod because it goes really hard. I'm really proud of all of the episodes that I posted there. I know they're valuable. I know they're super helpful. So if you are more of an audio person, audio podcast person, like you're cleaning your toilet, listening to a podcast, definitely recommend checking out my audio pod. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.